Excellent. Welcome everybody for today's incredibly important announcement. Today I'm joined by Dr. Kerry Chan, who will provide a health update. Also the Minister for Women, Bronwyn Taylor, the Treasurer, Matthew Keane, Mark Speakman, the Attorney General, as well as Annabelle Daniel, the Chair of Domestic Violence New South Wales, and Wendy, a domestic violence survivor, to share her story and discuss this significant announcement today. Well, today we're putting together the largest package for victim survivors of domestic violence in our state's history, close to $500 million in investment. And I think one of the silver linings of the pandemic, and yes, we focused on the health support, we focused on economic and business support, but we don't want any single person in this state to be left behind. There is no person, no woman, no children who should suffer domestic violence and live in those environments. And from a state's perspective, we want to do everything we can to ensure that that support is provided for survivors of domestic violence right across our state. And I'm very pleased to say with the Treasurer, in putting together this package, we know will make a real difference. And the advocates for domestic violence in New South Wales support that they have provided 75 new refuges with wraparound services in locations which we know where there is need and where that support will be, as well as a significant investment in social and affordable housing. A couple of hundred new social and affordable housing investment today, which will ensure that those women, children who are domestic violence survivors are given the support and care that they need. No one should suffer in this way. And we know that this significant investment today will make a real difference to women and to children right across our state. There's been a lot of investment during this pandemic. And what I've been proud of as part of this government, as Treasurer and now Premier, is that we've dealt with the pandemic as issues have arisen. We've dealt with the health crisis. We've dealt with the economic crisis. But our investments have not just been limited to that. We want to make sure every single person across our state gets through this difficult time. And whether it was our announcement on the weekend with Minister Taylor in relation to record investment in mental health support, because we know many people, particularly many young people, as school goes back, have suffered significantly when it comes to mental health illness. And that support that we provided, that significant investment yesterday, we know will make a real difference to people's lives, particularly our young people. Our record investment, which Minister Keane announced on the weekend in social and affordable housing, our skills investment, and then today support for those women and children who have suffered domestic violence and are survivors. We want to make sure every single person right across the state gets through this difficult time. The role of government continues, and I think the silver lining of this pandemic will be the significant support we've provided and the opportunity that this investment, these are big numbers, but more importantly, they will have real impact on women and children across the state. So I want to particularly thank Annabelle and the support for domestic violence in New South Wales, because advocacy outside government is crucial. The public service doesn't always have all the solutions. We listen to advocates and take action. And I really do believe this investment today will make a real difference. I want to thank the Treasurer because without his support, without this investment, we could not make this possible. So it's been a team effort, and I think today is a very important day in our state's history. And I think we'll look back on this day with this significant investment and know that it made a real difference to people's lives. I'm now going to have Dr. Chan just to provide a health update, and then we'll have the ministers, Annabelle and Wendy, will also then tell their story.
So there were 273 locally acquired cases of COVID reported in New South Wales in the 24 hours to 8 p.m. last night, and 90,597 tests. So thank you for those people that continue to come forward at testing. I'd like to urge that both those that are fully vaccinated and those that are not vaccinated need to come forward if you've got COVID symptoms. In terms of vaccination coverage, we reached 92.1% of people aged 16 and over had their first dose of COVID vaccine. and 80.8% were fully vaccinated. Thank you to everyone who's come forward for vaccination. And in the age group 12 to 15-year-olds, we've got 74.8% have had their first dose and 35.3% are fully vaccinated. Again, a very pleasing result. There are currently 589 COVID cases admitted to hospital, 128 people in intensive care, and 69 whom require ventilation. And the age ranges of people in ICU highlight that COVID can be a severe illness for all. So please continue to get vaccinated. Sadly, we're reporting the deaths of 4 people, 3 men and 1 woman. 3 people were in their 60s and 1 person was in their 80s. 1 person was from the Northern Beaches, 1 from southwestern Sydney, and 1 person was from inner Sydney, and 1 person was from Wollongong. 2 were not vaccinated, 1 had received 1 dose of COVID vaccine, and the other had just recently received her second, the person received a second dose. Can I just extend my condolences to the loved ones for their losses. So 92%, a great achievement, but let's get higher. Let's try and aim for 95%. Our colleagues in ACT have gone beyond that, so I set up the challenge to everyone. So please reach out and help those around you get vaccinated. If anyone is having difficulty either making a booking or getting to a booking, please help them. It's essential that we protect as many people as possible. And with school returning, the 12 to 15-year-olds have got vaccinated at a very high rate, but we are seeing that slowing a little bit. So could we just get that last 25% of the 12 to 15-year-olds vaccinated? It will make, it's one additional layer of protection as schools go back, and we get that added mixing of the 12 to 15-year-olds. And again, a reminder, sadly, we are seeing people that have got underlying health conditions that are not yet vaccinated, so please seek vaccination. But also, the ATAGI recommended that for those people that might be undergoing chemotherapy, those people that are on renal dialysis, those people that are taking medications that suppress your immune system, you actually need 3 doses, not 2, to give you protection. So please check with your doctor and get vaccinated now, and please continue to get tested. We are seeing cases increase in regional areas. We're seeing cases in Hunter, New England, around the Lake Macquarie, Wollongong, and other regions. So please be vigilant wherever you are across the state. Get vaccinated, but also get tested and stay home if you have COVID symptoms.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much, Dr. Chant. Really great to see those numbers coming down. So today is a really good day in terms of domestic family violence and the prevention of that. But I'd really like to start off by saying an enormous thank you to Annabelle and to all of the people that work in this sector, because their advocacy has been tireless, their advocacy has been genuine, and their advocacy has gone on for a long time to make sure that these services are coming forward. We know when we look at things like homelessness in women that one of the major causes of that has been as a sufferer of domestic family violence. Now with this announcement today, close to 80 new refuges and refurbished refuges across New South Wales. I'm very pleased to know too that a large part of those will happen in regional New South Wales, where we will welcome these services. These are so important because it's so important that when women are victims of this violence, that they have the choice, they are able to find the refuge to be able to make them be able to pursue their lives and to have really good outcomes. And I say not only for the victim of domestic family violence, but for their children, for their extended families, and for their communities. Because it's announcements like this where we invest in people. So often we talk about the things that we need to in terms of infrastructure and in terms of things that are happening in our state. But to be part of a government over the last 48 hours that is talking about investment in mental health services, investment today in victims of domestic family violence, this really matters and it really counts, because what it enables people to do is to be able to go forward and live their best life when they have perhaps found themselves in a horrific circumstance. But now they have the opportunity to leave that circumstance, to feel safe, to feel valued, and to feel that in this society, in this community now in New South Wales, there is enormous hope and a fantastic future for them. But again, I say to the sector, thank you so much. Thank you for your relentless advocacy, for making us all know what was needed to be done. But today in New South Wales is a proud day because we're investing in our people, and this is really what matters.
Well, as we focus on the economic recovery, we want to make sure no one is left behind. Today's announcement is the biggest single investment in domestic violence in our state's history. It will almost double the number of women's refuges available right across New South Wales. And what it will mean is that for victims, survivors escaping an abusive relationship, there's a safe place to go with the support available. This will change lives, this will save lives, and there is no more important legacy that a government can leave. This is a government with a heart. This is a government that is focused on growing our economy, but making sure that no one is left
behind. Today's announcement will change lives and save lives. Today is a sad day and a happy day. It's a sad day because yet again we have to reflect on some dreadful domestic violence statistics. But it's a happy day because this announcement gives a beacon of hope. It's a sad day because yet again we have to reflect on how endemic domestic violence is in our society. Notwithstanding all our advances, notwithstanding we're one of the most civilised places on the planet, every day women and children and men in some cases are suffering domestic and family violence. We know that New South Wales Police respond to over 140,000 domestic and family violence incidents every year. Every 9 days on average in Australia, a woman dies at the hands of a current or former intimate partner. They are terrible statistics, but today is a beacon of hope. And this beacon of hope is not just about the bricks and mortar of building social housing or building refuges, but the wraparound service that will be provided with that. This is a doubling of our women's refuge capacity in New South Wales. It represents around 80% increase in specialist domestic violence spending in New South Wales. It is the single biggest domestic violence investment in New South Wales history. And it's not just those refuges, it's not just that social housing, it's the counsellors, the educators, the caseworkers, the legal advisors that will be on site at core and cluster premises right across New South Wales, giving women and children the wraparound services they need. Today is a day for thank yous as well. The Premier and the Treasurer have certainly hit the ground running in the last couple of weeks. We've seen enormous strides towards economic recovery in New South Wales and hitting the ground running, tackling important social issues. Big spending on mental health, big spending on social housing, and now big spending on tackling domestic and family violence. It's a sign of a civilised society, how it looks after those who are most vulnerable. And it's pretty hard to think of people who are more vulnerable than women and children escaping domestic and family violence. This gives them a beacon of hope. So a big thank you to the Premier and Treasurer. A big thank you to the frontline services who every day deal with women and children under enormous pressure, under enormous stress, and often under enormous risk. They don't do these jobs for thanks or for gratitude. They do it because they know it's the right thing. But we as a society owe such an enormous debt to these caseworkers, to these counsellors, to these social workers who front up every day dealing with enormous social problems. A big thank you to the advocates like Annabelle Daniel who have been crying out for more investment in social housing and more investment in transitional and crisis accommodation. That advocacy has been so important. So thank you, Annabelle, and thank you to the countless number of advocates right across the domestic and family violence sector in New South Wales. And finally, a big thank you to the victim survivors like Wendy, who's joining us today. Without them relaying to us their lived experience, the horror of domestic and family violence, I just don't think our minds, our imaginations will be captured to make the sort of huge investment we are today. So thank you to all those people. As I say, it's a sad day because of the damning statistics we have to face, but I hope it's a happy day because there is a beacon of hope for the victim survivors of domestic and family violence.
Good morning everyone. My name's Annabelle Daniel. I'm the Chief Executive of Women's Community Shelters and the Chair of Domestic Violence New South Wales, the peak body for domestic and family violence services in New South Wales. We welcome this morning's announcement of significant investment in specialist domestic and family violence services and additional social housing. Both are critical in supporting women and children leaving domestic violence and enabling them to build new futures together. Well-funded women's refuges and shelters do the work of many agencies, supporting women and children to access sustainable housing, medical and legal supports, police and justice assistance, as well as providing employment, education and training opportunities. Domestic and family violence is the leading cause of women's homelessness in New South Wales, and we know that when we raise awareness around domestic and family violence, women raise their hands for help. Currently, approximately 1 in 2 women who seek specialist assistance are turned away due to a lack of space. And our experience tells us that coming out of last year's COVID lockdown, we know that specialist services will be in high demand in the weeks and months ahead. The announcement of more funding to build and operate women's shelters will assist the sector to accommodate these increased demands, particularly in rural, regional and remote New South Wales. Domestic Violence New South Wales is enormously grateful to the frontline workers, advocates and victim survivors who have advocated for the greater availability of these places of safety and support. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Wendy Boyd. I'm a survivor of domestic violence. Domestic violence changed my life. I was extremely battered emotionally and mentally and physically. I woke up each day in an environment that was no longer safe for me, and I found it very difficult to get out of it. Thanks to housing and support networks that were in place for me, after a long period of time I suffered mental health, PTSD and a lot of other issues. But thanks to housing and affordable housing and somewhere safe to live and having support networks in place, that benefited me greatly. It changed my life. I found stability. I'm studying, I'm doing law, and you know, 5 or 6 years ago I was an emotional mess and I had nowhere safe that I felt comfortable to live and function in, and you lose your independence and emotionally and mentally you become a battered human being. But with funding and the government, what they're doing today, what they're about to announce, is incredible. It'll change people's lives. It gives people safety and independence to live and freedom and have support networks in place that will benefit them. And that's the biggest challenge. It's not about just getting out of a domestic violence situation, it's about what you're surrounded with afterwards. And yeah, so that, I think that's amazing. I think it's incredible, and yeah, it'll be healthy for many people and children as well, and not just women. Lots of men suffer domestic violence as well. So I think it's an incredible thing that they're doing, and yeah, it'll be nice to see what happens in the future. Thank you.
Questions? Just a couple of COVID questions first. Is that okay, sorry? Then we'll deal with them. So you mentioned just the age. You mentioned an age range of people in ICU. Are you able to give us the age of the youngest person currently in ICU, and how would you describe what's going on in ICU wards at the moment? There's a few videos out that suggest there's still a lot of pressure on ICU wards.
So we've currently got 2 between the ages of 0 to 9 and 1 in their teens, and we can get some further details about it, because obviously sometimes with the younger children they may have underlying health conditions, and so COVID may be a co-diagnosis. So we look at that clearly very closely to understand what's happening, particularly with young people, because it is a rarer event. In terms of our ICU, I think the numbers speak for themselves. I would just like to have a big shout out to our ICU clinicians, our nurses, everyone who's associated with caring for people in ICU, the emergency department, throughout the hospitals. It's been a very busy time, but pleasingly we've seen those case numbers in ICU go down. Now that's not going to mean that they've got much of a breather, because we also have business as usual. So I think it is a responsibility of all of us to do all we can, get vaccinated, continue to follow the public health advice, and let's try and make sure that our ICUs have as fewer possible people with COVID in them as we open up over this Christmas New Year period.
So you say business as usual. Have you provided advice to government about when we should return to elective service?
My role is in public health, but the whole system managers sit within health, and they're looking at what can be reasonably done to recommence some elective surgery and some business as usual occurs. So my key message to anyone in the community though is it doesn't matter what, if you're experiencing chest pain, if you've got a prolonged headache, if you feel that you're unwell, our health services have always been here for you and will continue to be. It is much better that you present early than late, and in the end you can prolong your ICU admission if you do not attend promptly. So please be aware that our health system is a very connected one, a very resilient one. I think it's reasonable to reflect that we've been under strain, and our health system at all times can sometimes be under strain, but we do want people to seek care and seek care early.
Dr. Chan, are we all closer to redefining what a close contact is, and will a practice those contacts still have to isolate for 7 or 14 days?
So yes, close contacts still need to isolate. In general, a close contact is someone in the household. So we know that anyone who lives with a person with COVID is at high risk. We have decreased the time frame needed for those that are vaccinated as compared to non-vaccinated household contacts. And we've also factored vaccination into whether you become a close contact. So my key messages are that households are still the highest risk, and then next layer is the people that you spend lots of time with. Boyfriends, partners, people that you socialise with in indoor environments. That's going to be generally close contacts, and then occasionally there will be workplace contacts depending. And that's why it's important to always do those layers of protection.
Can you clarify the workplace contact?
Okay.
An office situation.
Okay, so an office situation, if someone is positive in an office, we will assess what type of contact it is. But if everyone's practicing COVID-safe behaviours, keeping that social distancing, then you won't have that interaction. There will be circumstances in any workplace that you can be a close contact, because often we also do drop our guard, as we've said, in tea rooms. We also go out for lunch. We also socialise after work. So it's not to say that none of your workplace colleagues will ever not be close contacts. But one of the key things you can do is continue to follow those COVID-safe practices and also get vaccinated. If you're vaccinated, it gives us a lot more assurance. But remember, vaccines are not 100% effective in getting the disease, so we still need you to get tested and follow our public health advice.
So just to clarify, you've reduced that from 14 to 7 days for fully vaccinated.
For fully vaccinated.
Make an individual assessment.
So in terms of, let's just take it through. In terms of a close contact, if you had COVID, it would be your household family. And if they were all vaccinated, we'd say 7 days and get a test, and then we'd also tell you not to go to high-risk environments, for your contacts not to go to high-risk environments. So we'd say, please don't go to aged care or hospitals in that 14 days. Stay away from those, unless you obviously needed to for an end-of-life care or anything that was ultra urgent, and then the hospital would give you appropriate PPE for that. We'd then ask you about your who you've been socialising with. So have you spent significant periods of time indoors with people at pubs, clubs, hotels, in your own home? Have you welcomed those people? And most of those individuals will also be close contacts, because generally they're often sometimes got more contact than our household members. So that group. And then in workplace, we'd assess what you are exposed to in your workplace. So if you actually have maintained all those COVID-safe behaviours and fully vaccinated, you're very unlikely to become a close contact. However, if you've all taken your masks off in the tea room and spent an hour having a party, you will then get tipped over into a close contact. So we assess that, and we've provided guidance around a business matrix where businesses can look at that and give them an idea. So the key message is hierarchy of controls, put in those multiple controls, and then that reduces your risk of having any disruption to your business continuity. So we would urge everyone to do as much as they can to prevent transmission.
Dr. Chan, it's been over a week now since we opened up. Case numbers are still sitting in 200s. Are you still expecting them to go up, and at what point do you think that will happen? days or early next week?
Look, there's a lot of uncertainties about what case numbers will do. We would believe that they would go up. As we have more interactions, they'll go up. But as I said, it is in the hands of everyone. So the more people continue to get tested, the more people follow the public health advice, the more people that get vaccinated all give us protections. So we have, to some extent, all of the modelling depends on judging what the testing levels are, what the vaccination levels are, what the number of interactions people have. So we've given guidance, and so to some extent it is about how people behave responsibly as we open up, what the models will show. But we were expecting, it does take a lag, so we wouldn't be expecting numbers to rise within a 2 week, 2 week period. We'll get a sense. So next week I'll be really interested in what our numbers are, but we are working very hard to keep the numbers as suppressed, and I'm so pleased we've got 90,000 tests. We're going to need to keep those testing rates up, and thank you every one of those individuals who've come forward.
Are there any areas that you're watching closely, just in terms of case numbers in certain areas? Are there any areas that are causing you concern that you're watching closely?
Obviously we're working closely with our Victorian colleagues around border communities. We're obviously very focused on our Aboriginal communities and making sure that we're suppressing whilst vaccine coverage gets up higher in those areas. And it's a big call out because we do know in some of our regions there is just slightly lower vaccine coverage. They're catching up really quickly, but we want to buy them as much time to get those levels up as high as possible. And as I've said before, I want to get 95% or even above, because it still leaves a lot of people vulnerable, and we will also see COVID transmitting. This vaccine will not create no COVID. What we need to do is still keep levels suppressed so we're less likely to impact on a vulnerable person. But our narrative will also change, where we'll be much more asking people to make individual decisions about what they do. So it'll be about guidance for immunocompromised, guidance about what's a safer environment to eat outdoors. We'll give tailored messages for people that have got those particular risks, because notwithstanding the great effectiveness of the vaccines, there will be, if you're very elderly or you've got severe underlying health conditions, even if you're fully vaccinated, it's not the vaccine, your likelihood if you come in contact with COVID will still be a greater chance of hospitalisation.
Just to be clear, the Aboriginal rate of vaccination is still lagging behind the rest
Our Aboriginal vaccination has really gone up radically, and I'd just like to thank all the hard work of the Aboriginal community controlled, our local health districts, our primary health networks, GPs, pharmacists, everyone has, and the Commonwealth, everyone who has played a role in pushing that up. All I'm highlighting is that for me, I want to really see those levels as high as possible. We know they have been a little lower, and there's been that disparity, and what we're doing now is putting intense effort to catch it up. And I just want to again acknowledge the role of the Aboriginal community controlled in reaching out to the communities to get those vaccination coverage up as well.
And Dr. Chan, will you do booster shots for healthcare workers?
I'll just do. Okay, so boosters, I'll do boosters and then impact. So in terms of boosters, ATAGI, so there's two different things. I've just announced today and reinforced the advice that ATAGI had issued about 2 weeks ago, which was about a need for a third primary course. So that's saying that to get the same level of response to the vaccine for some people whose immune systems aren't as good, need 3 doses, and that's already out there, and that's why I'm asking people that have had undergoing cancer treatment, renal dialysis, people that are on special medications to suppress their immune response need to get the 3rd dose, and they need to check it. In terms of the booster recommendations, ATAGI is currently considering the recommendations. You've probably seen a variety of recommendations internationally, and I understand that they will be releasing that very, very shortly. And obviously, as soon as that advice is released, we as a system with GPs, pharmacies, our state clinics will rapidly implement that, and it's great to see how quickly we can vaccinate our community once that guidance comes out. I think the question about hospitalisations in ICU, obviously there is a relationship between hospitalisation, COVID cases, hospitalisations and ICU, but what we want to do is get to some extent disconnect between those. So if you're fully vaccinated and get COVID, your likelihood of being in hospital is reduced, and your likelihood of ever getting into ICU is further reduced. So what we're trying to see is that we get this disconnect through the use of vaccination. Having said that, we want to keep numbers as low as possible because we know not everyone in the community is fully protected from the vaccination, and so it's this two-edged sword where we're balancing numbers whilst knowing that the vaccines work effectively to protect our most vulnerable. We're already seeing the effect of the vaccine, and I think even Victoria, in terms of its numbers, there's been discussions that the vaccines have had some effect, and for us they're obviously having an effect. They're having an effect on driving transmission down. So if someone is vaccinated and I've got COVID, they're less likely to get it. So we're blocking that chain of transmission. So the vaccination coverage has been a major force in driving our case numbers. But it can't work alone. Everyone is still going to have to act responsibly and take those very minor measures. But the more we can actually add those to the mix, and people continue to behave in ways that are COVID safe, that will mean our case numbers can remain low, and we have that protection for the most vulnerable in our community that are not afforded the protection, as well as those that don't have any underlying health conditions or that are not elderly.
Premier, can I just please ask about today's announcement? We heard from Annabelle in her part of the microphone that obviously the experience from last year's lockdown was there a great demand and people were turned away. In terms of these 75 extra spots, extra refuge, when are we going to see that? Because it sounds like the demand is going to be there almost immediately.
We want construction to occur as quickly as possible. And I think one of the things we learned last year during the pandemic, I take social and affordable housing, I saw this personally as treasurer, that a lot of the maintenance work we did not only put people into work who are out of work, but importantly, in addition to that, it provided housing for people for the very first time. So there's going to be a great social benefit that comes from this pandemic. Governments just have to make the investments. There's no better time to make the investments than now. Domestic and family violence is a stain on our society. And as the Attorney General has said, it's a sad day today, but a great day. It's a sad day because governments shouldn't have to make these investments. We shouldn't have these problems to solve, but unfortunately we do. And the best thing we can do as a state is to ensure that particularly women and children who are in these environments are able to escape them, have housing, and importantly have those wraparound services. And I think, as Treasurer and now as Premier, we've always said when something works, we'll continue to invest, we'll expand programs. And Wendy telling her story today, I think, is not just important for society because it shines a light on this travesty, but importantly it informs government of what works, and when things work, we'll continue to invest.
Obviously it's an investment across 4 years. It's not going to take 4 years to get them all, is it? I know it's a 4-year investment. It's not going to take 4 years to get all refugees open.
No, I mean, this would be the type of thing that we'd want to get up and running as quickly as possible. As Minister Taylor has pointed out, a lot of the locations will be based in regional New South Wales. We will target where the need is and where the support services can be wrapped around to provide the best benefit. Well, that's obviously part of it. One of the key things is not just housing. One aspect is housing. Social and affordable housing and refuges are important, but if you don't have the support services to provide women and children and men, as has been said in certain instances, that care and support, then it won't work. We've seen that with homelessness. We've seen that with mental health. Right across the board, you've got to have an array of initiatives, and that's what we've done. So, well, this is all aspects of government. You see, I've been at a number as part of the economic recovery program with Treasurer Keane. You've often seen many ministers. That's not by accident. That's because we have all aspects of government working together to provide that support for people. So housing is an important aspect here. We are providing 200 social and affordable housing. We're providing up to 75 refuges But that's just one aspect, and that whilst that's a significant investment, that doesn't work if you don't have the support services. And I know, working very closely with the Attorney General, has been very passionate about the domestic violence support, because if we can continue those investments, we don't just provide housing. We saw that in the budget this year, that the investment, staying home, leaving home, that gets people and women and children into an environment and in their communities that provides that support for them, and that's what this is all about.
So really, there's been a bit of back and forth between the state and the government in this space, specifically over domestic violence and homelessness shelters. How much of this is funding that you've been thinking about in the past? Are you hoping that there's companies can be with more funding, given that it's going to go?
But we haven't got time to wait. We saw Sunday's mental health announcement. We have to move, and the challenges that the pandemic has set up aren't just health and economic, and yet we will always welcome federal financial support, but we're going to stand on our own 2 feet as well. And whether it's investments in mental health, domestic violence, social and affordable housing, New South Wales is all in. We want to provide the most support we can for people right across the state. We don't want anyone in New South Wales to fall behind. We don't want anyone to fall through the crack. That's what we're focused on. We want New South Wales, every single person, regardless where you live. We're not going to pit community against community. We're not going to play class warfare. When we are going to invest right across the state where the need is, we will deliver. And if that's in mental health services, if that's in providing more homelessness services and social and affordable housing and support for victims of domestic violence, we are all in. We want every single person in this state to get through this pandemic and come out stronger the other side. And I think we have a once in 100-year opportunity to make critical investments that potentially governments wouldn't make in good times. We're going to make them in bad times and get every single person through. We've said from the outset, we're going to put people before the budget. That's what we're going to do.
In 2014,
I mean, the financial and economic foundations in our state are incredibly strong. It is the strong financial management of this government prior to the pandemic that enabled us more than any other government in the country to leverage our position and invest to help people. The investments you're seeing today, the investments you've seen over the last 4 days as part of this economic recovery are not happening anywhere else in the country. They are happening in New South Wales. And they're happening in New South Wales because of our strong financial management over the years that set up our state to be in a position to do this. And good governments don't just focus on the issues in front of them, they look to the future. They look at the whole range, and I'm proud to lead a government that continues to look at areas of need and record investment. And that's what we're going to do. And these are big numbers, but behind these big numbers are people. And that's what we're focused on.
But in 2014, Premier, the government changed the oversight and the funding model for shelters and women's services. And experts at the time said that's adversely affected homeless shelters and domestic violence victim support services. So isn't this just making up for 6 years of neglect?
Well, compare us on the record. Compare this investment to any other state. This is an investment that's based on strong advocacy from the sector that's spoken to us about where we could invest for impact. Governments don't always get it right, and they shouldn't be criticised for getting things wrong. They should be criticised if they get something wrong and doggedly continue to pursue it. That's not what we're going to do. This investment today is able to be made because of the strong financial management. We've listened to where we can invest with impact. We have a strong public service, strong ministers who have provided that advice to the government. But I really want to thank Annabelle for her strong advocacy, because this investment probably wouldn't be made but for her. Because sitting down with government, sitting down with the minister, sitting down with the treasurer and saying, here is where I believe you can make a real difference. Hearing stories like Wendy's stories, which are numerous right across our state, gives direction to the government about where we can invest with impact. And actually, if we got things wrong in the past, I'm not across that, but if we got things wrong in the past, well, we put our hands up and say we got it wrong. But I can tell you, I'm very confident the investment we're making today will make a real difference to women and children right across our state.
How do you determine time frame? I know you say you want this to happen as soon as possible, but how do people know this isn't just more dollars, more
Well, as soon as possible, and the money flows immediately. We'll work. You know, if I don't want to have planning or local councils hold up this. We want to work right across government. Not only to provide a great social outcome, as we've seen today, like this is going to provide great support for survivors of domestic violence, but in addition to that, it's going to drive the economic recovery as well in construction. And we saw that last year. Small projects, whether it's maintenance, smaller construction, these are the things that get people into work quickly. We lost 250,000 jobs so far since we handed down the budget in June. It's many people out of work. I want people back into work as quickly as possible. I saw firsthand last year in Arncliffe when I went out to visit some of the social housing there, what a poor state that housing was in. To then meet young people who had been out of a job, immediately in a job, to come back 2 months later and see someone who was sleeping rough now having a roof over their head for the very first time. That was pandemic success last year, and that's what we're going to do again. So my view is that, and the Treasurer will be right across this, because we want the money flowing fast. We want construction to occur as quickly as possible. Absolutely, we want to move as quickly as we can, and we're going to work with the councils and the government to get construction commenced expeditiously, because the key here, which we saw last year, is the faster we go, the more we can get people into work as quickly as possible.
What was the reaction in the Perrottet household today to the big news that Emma Watkins is handing back her yellow?
They were distraught. Distraught. I mean, how are the Wiggles without Emma? We'll see. But no, I woke up to the news. Harriet was distraught. But you know, they'll get over it in time, and the Wiggles have evolved over the years, and I'm sure I have complete confidence that the Wiggles will be great again.
For another issue, Premier, I know the Agriculture Minister made an announcement about members of the Regional Development Office being able to work on farms, but when is it going to get to the point that you allow Pacific Islander people to come into the country to work on farms to address that skills shortage, even regarding what the Prime Minister had to say about after? Because the farmers are apparently desperate for extra.
Oh, they are, and we did that last year for regional New South Wales, and was quite successful in terms of separate quarantining. But we have a significant issue in this state and in this country when it comes to labour shortages, and it needs to be addressed. You know, and I'm hearing it everywhere I go. I'm hearing it at hairdressers. I'm hearing it at pubs and restaurants. We need to address labour shortages. Ultimately, though, the first concern that I have, and the Treasurer has, is getting people back into work as quickly as possible. We want to recover every one of those jobs, but you know, businesses are struggling. I was having dinner at the Longueville Hotel just last night, and they've gone through the last week significant, like breaking all records. They're about 200% over, but they're short of staff. So it's a real challenge for us. It's going to be a real challenge in regional New South Wales, but we're across it. I've raised it with the federal government, but this goes back to the point as to why we need the changes we made last week to our hotel quarantine program were crucial, because we can't move forward with archaic systems. And now saying that New South Wales, we've declared New South Wales is open for business, and if you're double vaccinated, you don't have to quarantine. Now, we're not going to discriminate, as I said last week, between returning Australians. Yes, we want returning Australians home, and as quickly as possible. But for businesses, for international students, and importantly for those industries that have labour shortages. I do know that the federal government are looking at this. I know it is very much front of mind for them. I've spoken to the Prime Minister about it. I know their ministers are actively looking at this, and I would expect them to deal with it.
On voluntary assisted dying, has Cabinet come to a decision on whether or not there will be a conscience vote allowed, and are you taking that position to the party room this morning?
Yes.
Sorry. Cabinet has come to a decision?
Yes.
And is a conscience vote going to be allowed?
It's going to the party room at 10 o'clock.
So what was the decision Cabinet made on it?
Well, I'll inform the party room.
The Attorney General is working on a bill looking to...
Can I speak to the Attorney?
But looking to introduce a bill that will give people what was on balance is like a similar proposal was introduced last year and cut back by the human rights code. What will be different this time and what does this need?
Well, the Attorney will speak on detail, but I believe drug reform is incredibly important in this state. It's always sat in the too hard basket for too long, and we are going to address it. And I certainly want to see in our state as well a significant focus and investment in rehabilitation. And I know the Attorney General is working on this and doing an amazing job, because when the systems of the past don't work and the structures don't work, well, things need to change and governments need to be brave and take them on. And this government is not going to shy away from the tough political challenges that are in front of us. And reform can be hard, but if you're doing the right thing, you should keep going. And that's exactly what we're going to do. And I have full confidence in the Attorney General that he might want to.
Yeah. Ask about the 75 locations as well. Have they been
Why don't we go?
Why don't we speak to just about this announcement today?
Can you give us a couple? Can you give us a bit more detail? Sorry, just on the drug reform. What are you looking at?
Look, I'm not going to speculate on the detail of what will go before Cabinet. I'll pay my Cabinet colleagues the courtesy of consulting them first. But what is clear is that we need to do something different in New South Wales with drug policy. We know that locking people up and throwing away the key is not the answer to their drug addiction. A criminal justice response is very important. We have to go against the suppliers, the importers, the peddlers in the misery of death and illness and destruction. But at the end of the day, a health response has to be at the front of mind in any way we deal with drug addicts. So I and the Health Minister will take some proposals to the Cabinet in due course. There is a very extensive body of work to do. This government has been committed to tackling the scourge of ice addiction and all other drug addiction right across New South Wales. That's why we commissioned the ice inquiry, which has made over 100 recommendations. There's a plethora of work to do on that, and in due course we'll make announcements.
And Attorney General, if I can ask you about this announcement today, the 75 locations, have they been selected yet, or how will you determine those? In terms of the regional facilities for safety and privacy, will they be undisclosed locations, or is it better if they're on?
Look, generally speaking, with a women's refuge, you don't disclose the location for security reasons. The locations have not yet been finalised. I think the majority of the locations will be in regional New South Wales, because that is where the greatest amount of unmet demand for crisis accommodation is. So those decisions will be made over the coming months, and certainly they will be secure and, I think, generally speaking, undisclosed locations.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, guys.